Hey, everybody. It is the last day of June 2021. Welcome to the Dev Talk Show with my co-hosts Andy Schwam and Rich Ross. I'm Chris Gomez, and we are here halfway through the year, I guess. I mean, close enough, right? Last day of the last day of June is close enough. I don't know if it's exactly halfway in terms of days or hours or minutes, but we're there. End of the second quarter already, 2021. Can you believe it? Is it going fast for both of you?
It's been flying by. It's summer's already begun. We are. Yeah, we had a conversation a couple, been over a month ago that it already felt like we were flying through the year. But yeah, I'm looking forward to Christmas already.
Wow. Yeah. You started your Christmas shopping.
No, that'll still be another 180 days away.
180. You might miss it then.
Well,
anyways,
it's half a year.
I know, but another half a year is past Christmas, right? You'll miss it by a week.
Okay.
That's me being way too literal about it. But you're right. It's already getting started on thinking about like what are we going to finish the year strong? And I really do. This year felt like more of a holding pattern where every day I still felt like, well, it's early 2021, right? But it's not. It's not. Mm-hmm. So in the developer world, it's been a strange year, I think. We're still, I would say for the most part, we're still attending meetups and conferences and things virtually, but we're beginning to see some change. I think I forget what was recently held in Orlando. I don't know if it was Dev Intersection maybe, but yeah. And we have Tech Bash coming up in November, October. I pushed it back a month, Andy. I'm sorry. So Tech Bash in October in the Poconos here in the Northeast. Which was my plan to get Andy to pitch Tech Bash to everybody, but I'm sure he's trying to figure out how the stream sounds right now. So that's not it. We hear you, Andy. I don't know if he hears us. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put in the chat that.
Yeah, I'm not hearing my mic on this thing.
Oh, okay. You hear us. So basically, we hear you in Skype, but you're saying it's not going out. All right.
Yeah. What's going on?
A little while ago, you and I tried out an experiment, a small show, or a pre-recorded talk that was just a few minutes that we called TDTS Breakpoint. Like you're setting a breakpoint for the day. I guess if you have to explain it, then maybe it's not a good title. I don't know. and on that particular episode, which you can see at the YouTube channel. So if you're watching us live on Twitch right now, that is out on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/TheDevTalkShow. But when we did that, we talked a lot about second half goals, things you'd like to get to, projects you'd like to get to, and so, for me, one of those things was to try and start to build a little app for myself. But I don't necessarily want to do it the way that a lot of folks maybe are used to if you've been in this for a while, the traditional file new project, and you've got a web application, a web project, it's going to go on a web server. Kind of thinking more about, I hate to use the buzzwords, but I'm kind of thinking more about like a serverless model. Mm-hmm. Where basically the data in the system is passed around to components that process it via events instead of, okay, a request comes into this server and then that server does the heavy lifting. It's more like, I'd rather it comes into a serverless something front end that then passes that along to, maybe it puts it on a queue. I don't know. But it's funny. I've been saying that for a while, and yet getting started is it's taking the first step in any project, Rich. What are some of your tips for developers, putting you on the spot, for when you're just trying to get past that initial, I have an idea and you don't know where to start? Like, is there anything that you do to maybe take the first step so that you're not constantly looking ahead but not starting?
Yeah, and that's a tough one, right? Because we know all of we've talked about them on the shows, right? What are the things to be thinking about from different principles and different architectures and different ways of building it out? And so you kind of want to do things in a certain way so that you're, this has to be done in a way that feels right from a development perspective. I think best thing to do is just jump in, right? Get yourself a GitHub repo, create a local Git repository, get a GitHub repo so you've got a place to check things in that are off your machine, because that's always the first thing you should do. And then just kind of get in there and if you're, I don't know,
Can you guys hear me?
I would say, if you're just trying to technology out, then just accept it, for what it is. Get in there and kick the tires around it, and just don't. At that stage, don't worry about all the ceremony.
Guys, I don't know what happened, but we lost audio for like a minute while Rich was talking, or so. I don't know what happened. It was gone. If you look in the chat, it's back. I think we're all back. I don't understand what exactly happened.
It's okay. We hear you.
Yeah, I think it's all working. Hopefully, my audio is going out over the stream. I don't know. I apologize. It seemed to just fix itself. I don't know what it is. If it was like a Skype thing or what.
Your audio is going out of the stream. I can hear that in my ear.
Yeah. So all right. Well, whatever it is, I'm sorry about that.
Okay. Yeah. No. So, Rich, you're talking about prototyping. As a good first step for when you want to try something out, but you don't know where to begin. Because I'll be the first to say, and one of the reasons I brought it up is because I think both of you have heard about project ideas that I've talked about for a very long time, and that first step just eludes me. I say, well, maybe next week, next weekend, might find a little time later. And later, I mean, we were just talking about how quickly the year has gone by. And you've probably heard a few of these things for years with an S at the end. So, I find that I actually do think that's interesting, because if it's something you have to do, especially as part of, if part of your job is to say, hey, we're going to show and educate, our customers, colleagues, whatever, whoever they are that you're working with, we're going to show them how they can accomplish things. Part of that is being able and willing to just go ahead and I'm struggling with this, with saying just go ahead and jump in, because I don't want it to sound reckless.
I think sometimes you have to jump in a little bit. One of the things I see, it's really interesting you talk about this, because there's a stage where there's design and there's, thinking about things and architecture. And there's another point where sometimes I say to people, we just got to start. Like, there's a fine balance there, right?
There definitely is.
Yeah, so I want to reserve jumping away from that topic too quickly, but it's got me thinking about something. So there's a lot of things that can be new to and here's something that maybe a lot of people don't understand, I think, about development. I worked with a developer once who, he used to tell war stories about punch cards and switches on mainframes, and that was how he had to code. So gives you an idea of what he'd seen. Right? As far as I'm concerned, he'd seen it all. And he said the trouble that he always had with giving the business estimates was that just about every project you had to work on was something that you've never done before. And I thought it was a very simplistic way to say it. And certainly estimating is just the bane of this industry. A business wants to know when something's going to ship, or do they have an idea of when something might ship? And so I'm not trying to turn this into an estimation discussion, but get back to the idea that in just about anything you want to prototype, there is probably some aspect you haven't done before.
Yeah. And there's some exploration that needs to happen as a result of all that.
Right. And some of that leads into the estimation, right? Some of it is that spike that, well, I don't know what I don't know, and I have really no idea how to give you an estimate. But if I play with this for 2 weeks or a week or whatever the time frame is, or a day, I'm going to come back and say, okay, it's throwaway code, but I was able to hook up to that email service or that other third-party thing that we were not familiar with ever using before, right? And wasn't sure how hard that was going to be. Or I never used Blazor before, but in a couple of days I kind of got somewhere with it. I'm throwing that away because it's prototype code, right? But okay, now maybe I'm smart enough to say, I think this is a 6-month project or a 3-month project or a 1-year project, right, Chris? But I think what you're talking about, maybe leads into that, that prototyping is a valuable part of it, to learn a little bit, to figure out, what the hard parts of the project are going to be. Maybe you get in there and you're like, okay, I could see a little bit this is going to be a challenge in this particular area.
Right. And so you're describing some things that we've heard I said by other folks, some people that sometimes I cite on this show. You said something about how you're gonna build a little prototype, and it sounded like you wanted to commit to throwing that away, which is something that we've heard from Fred Brooks, who writes that plan to write 2 systems because you're going to throw the first away anyway. I don't think I have that quote exactly right. And I like to cite him only because he wrote these things in the 70s. And so I want to make it clear to anybody who's sort of looks at the history of computer science the way I try to. I'm no specialist, but I find it fascinating that these ideas we struggle with today, when we talk about this industry moves so fast, I mean, same issues that were being discussed in 1975 and 1965 and earlier, that, hey, plan to throw away the first system. Kind of maybe he was restating what you just said. You're going to do a little bit of work, you're going to throw it away. One thing a term that I often use when I talk about these things, because we talk about them very generically, and I want people who watch the show, hopefully, that you can take some of this to work. So there's the business. We work for a business usually. How hard is it? This might be easier for some of you based on your roles, but how much of a struggle has it been in your career to convince the business that you should be spending a little bit of time prototyping and throw that away? When we've all probably met the business person, someone in our organizations that looks at it and says, well, what's wrong with that? Why don't we just go with that? That looks like it's working. Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's always a challenge, right? You don't want to, you want to show that, hey, we're going in the right direction. We've answered some questions, but you don't want to give them too much of a comfort in what you built to then say, that's great, ship it, because too often it's easy to see it and love it and say, hey, this is good to go. But it's a challenge I run into a lot. And I say, okay, we're talking about this being a prototype. What do we mean when we say prototype? Because everybody kind of has a little different understanding of that. least what they're probably the wrong way to say. They know what a prototype is, but their goal of what's going to happen to that prototype is a little different, maybe than we would want to do. So you just kind of need to level set and say, we're going to redo it. A lot of the production stuff is still yet to come as a result of what we're doing here.
There are a lot of I'm sure both of you, there are a lot of stereotypes that the business or business people who are experienced working with developers have about developers. You developers always pad your estimates. You always want to say it's not ready. Why can't you just get it done? Everybody, Rich is smiling, so I take it that we've met these people.
Well, I don't understand the point about that I always, my estimates are padded. I am a chronic underestimator. I get done in a week, no problem. And a month later is like we're still slogging through it. So,
I think you're right that developers as a whole are chronic underestimators. Maybe not every one of us. I think there's even some studies to back it up.
Okay.
That would be really interesting.
I think it tends to go in that direction too. I think even when and the funny thing is, even when we pad the estimate, right? And we do sometimes, right? Like we sort of do, we sort of don't, right? But even when we do, that's either we still underestimate, or that's just in a response to the fact that we pad it because we know that we're underestimating it. So we're like, oh, good gosh, I better add a couple weeks to that because I always underestimate things. I wouldn't say it's a padding for like the true padding sake. It's more like I know I'm wrong, so I'm going to pad this a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did start to get to that when I was doing things that were more production based, where it's like, all right, I'll take a week, let's say 2. And then, just because I know my estimates are wrong, on the light side. So I also think some of that is, at least for me, you fill the time that you're given. If somebody says, well, take 3 weeks, like, okay. And you'll be at the end of that 3 weeks and you're still, finalizing things up. I haven't come across, there are some, I haven't come across many developers where they get that time and it's done, early.
Well, sometimes it happens. This is the problem.
It does.
The problem with giving a longer date is that people do tend to fill the time. As a matter of fact, I believe in deadlines. Like, let's just be straightforward about that. Some people say, developers don't like to have deadlines. No, not having a deadline is usually a recipe for scope creep and all kinds of other things, and the project just goes on forever, right? And it's really hard to motivate. Sometimes you need a little pressure, you need a little crunch time, myself included. I'm not picking on any developers other than myself. We need a deadline, we need a target. The problem to me, it's interesting, is more often that the business, and it's so funny how we use this phrase, the business. Chris, I heard you say it a few times and I was laughing in my mind because we say the business and like, what does that mean, the business? It's a funny phrase we use, but the business units that we work for often give us a deadline. And to me, that's the one that really makes me crazy. Well, we will like this feature. We'd really like to go live with it in September. And that can be a challenge, as well. It all kind of fits into it. And so there, you talk about, how do you get started on a project? When we get that starting point, we usually get started really fast. Like, Chris, you were talking about like, well, let's, we want to take some time. Sometimes we get that and we're like, oh my gosh, we got to start going now. And that can be a challenge. There's a lot of challenges to the time. Time is, estimation is, I said today in a meeting with someone on my team, I honestly don't even remember who it was now, or maybe it was yesterday, that in software development, well, listen, I know we don't like to use the words hard or easy, right? But let's try to just accept that, But But software development isn't the hard part of our jobs. Like it can be, and I know it's annoying, right? But to me, the hard part is estimating the work. It's communicating. It's all that other stuff. It's getting started, whatever, the things you were talking about before. It's the soft skills to me that are the hard part. Don't get me wrong. Writing the code is a challenge, right? And we like it because it's a challenge. I'm not trying to say it's easy, but often it's a binary thing, when it comes to writing code, like, or when we write it, like we can see that it works or we can see that it fails and things like that. But it's these other areas where to me, it's like much harder. Everything is in shades of gray. Everything is confusing. And I find that is the place, to focus on. And estimating is such a big part of it, or getting started, or how to figure out, what we're going to do and all those things. That, to me, I guess I can't say it's the hardest part of the job, but certainly I would say it is not to be overlooked as a difficult challenge. Maybe that's a better way to rein it back in, because development is hard too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I guess talking about estimating a little bit, it reminds me of something in my past, which I tell this story not so much because I think anyone here should learn from it or copy this. But I worked somewhere once where we were asked to estimate any project, any job, and these projects might be anywhere from 2 weeks to maybe even several months in scope. And the reason why we were asked to estimate it was because then that estimation was used to come up with the contract, right? So there's a lot of contract work. You're basically like a contract house that somebody's coming to you saying, hey, we want to do something and we think you know how to do it. And then we'd have to write some software. And what was interesting, so this is the worst of all cases when it comes to estimation, because these estimates ended up being part of a plan to bill. Like, well, we think it's going to cost us many hours, so that we're going to put that as part. So you want to be right. And believe me, in good faith, we wanted to be right. And then when, of course, there was an underestimation, a lot of pressure was put on you personally that, you made this promise, and we made this promise to our customers. And while I understand that point of view and even think that there's correctness to it, the fact of the matter is you can't snap your fingers and make it appear. Like, we're still not Houdini. If it's not there, it's not there. And I think some of those mistakes led to things like the Agile Manifesto and some of those principles, which is not what I'm getting at. So for a particular project that was I would say probably had about 2 months of work to do with maybe about 3 to 4 developers, I was personally asked to do it. And we had a ton of trouble, a very checkered past, a very mistrusting business. And so I did this funny strategy. I got out an Excel spreadsheet and I just started typing row by row a thing that I thought had to be done. These were not user stories. They weren't. It was like, call the customer's API to retrieve records. Filter those records when a user comes to the site by that user's name. Join up to their backend authentication system. And I just started typing these things out. And at first I started trying to say, well, that sounds big. That sounds me. Essentially it was t-shirt sizing. And then I abandoned that. And the reason I abandoned it is because that t-shirt sizing and pointing and all that stuff, that meant nothing to the business. That meant nothing to them. I eventually broke these things down as far on each line. I tried to think of a task to do. And if the task was too big, I said, well, can I split that in two? And then what I eventually did is I eventually said, every one of these tasks is worth a day, even though I knew some of them weren't. And I didn't do this because I was trying to pull a fast one. I really didn't. I felt adrift. Like, I don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. So when I eventually turned this in, I got questioned about that. I mean, that big time. Like, why did you make everything a day? And I said, because honestly.
But Chris, I love that strategy, right? Everything's a day. And I get obviously there's some hyperbole when I say this is, a great strategy or whatever, but a lot of the things that you said are a day are probably 2 days or 3 days, right? So why not make everything a day? I mean, obviously there's some situations where that might seem, like a crazy idea, but I'm sure you could go through that same list and say, well, look at half these things are clearly more than a day. The point is, you did. I can't say you did the right thing, right? Because I don't know the outcome, but you did the right thing in terms of you need something, right? The whole thing with estimation, right, and I deal with this a lot, is, well, what do we know, right? We don't know what we don't know, but let's think about what we know. And what you started saying about making tasks, and I think t-shirt sizing is a great start. It might not be what the business needs, but it's enough for you to start thinking about it. Like I just did this week. I have a bunch of these little projects that make up this bigger project, and I did t-shirt sizing on them. And to tell you the truth, in a meeting when I presented it, and this was a dev leadership meeting, I said, I don't even know what these t-shirt sizes mean. I just know that this task is smaller than this other task, or these two are close, so I'm going to say they're the same. And I know what a small task is. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I know this is small, and I know this is an extra large, or this is a large. It's just something, right? And this is a good example of you have to start. You have to start. And you may not have the right answer, but you're starting to put some of the answers together. You're getting an idea, a list of tasks, a sizing of them, a relative sizing or whatever, and you're figuring things out. The idea, though, about making each one a day, I don't think I've ever quite done that. I usually try to do a little bit more of these are small and these are large, and and maybe say the small ones are a half a day, in a day or whatever. I mean, there's a million ways to do it. But I think you're onto something. I mean, it's just a way to get started, right? And
well,
if I have a client member here in chat is saying, what's the topic?
Yeah.
What is the topic officially? We're chatting about a bunch of stuff. Chris is throwing out some topics, and we talked a little bit about getting started. Yeah, Chris, you want to take that or?
I think it kind of started with is that we're already way through the year. How do we get started? I mean, there's half the year is gone. How close are we to accomplishing our goals? And it kind of kicked me off to, hey, I'm pretty bad at getting started on things that I've talked about for months and months and months and years. So how do you get started? And of course, that leads to, well, in order to start, you probably need a plan, right? And if you're going to plan, but in terms of, if I can, I'll finish that story pretty quickly because, so I was under the gun so that the business can now go bid for this thing. And again, this is an hourly based bid. And part of the reason why it fell to me is that my boss was literally just the day before they'd had their baby. And so he's out. And so he comes back in and he ends up unfortunately having to deal with the fallout of this estimate is obviously total crap because it didn't even, it's just days. There aren't any hours here or anything. So to cut to the chase, where I want to cut to is, yes, the business did rely on that to try and come up with a contract. And they ended up cutting out our legs a little bit and saying well, they wanted it soon. What your estimate did is there's no way we can finish the project in time.
Well,
if you're listening to us podcast style, you're watching me go, well, I mean, maybe there's something to that. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just trying to be realistic. I'm trying to be realistic. So the outcome of this was there was a little bit of split the difference with what the customer originally wanted, whatever. And it ended up, I ended up not finishing on that particular project. And so let's go to my boss. One day we go out to lunch and he says to me, hey, remember when you turned in that estimate and everything was you just put a day for everything? And I said, yeah. And he said, and oh man, dude, I took so much for that. And then I had to go and redo it all and whatever. He says, the other day I went and pulled that thing out. And then I pulled out how long, our actual work. Dude, you were off by 2 days.
That's awesome.
And he thought it was the greatest thing. He thought it was the greatest. Not because he thought I was brilliant. He didn't. Wasn't the point. Right. The point was really that we were both saying, when you list everything out you got to do, it was a more realistic take than anyone else's take. Right. Including the customer's expectation, including what the business wished they could do, because obviously what they want to say, yeah, we can do it faster and cheaper than everybody. what he was basically saying is it turned out to be the most realistic take of anyone involved. Not because you were brilliant. That wasn't the point. So I'm not recommending anyone else does that. But Andy, you did kind of get to what my mindset was, which was, isn't it all going to even out? Like that task is short, that task is long. They're going to wash, and it's going to be 2 days.
Yeah. And is time less the important thing, and it's more about making sure that you captured everything you got to do?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, you just got to have something. And the bigs and the smalls, at least what you ended up having was at least a count of the tasks or something like that, And if you didn't do that, you would have forgotten about half of the things. I mean, listen, there's also some luck involved, right? So the fact that you were off by a day or two, there's probably some dumb luck in there too, if you don't mind me saying so.
That's the point. It's not to say that it was brilliant. It was to say, and that's what he even said to me at the time. And you all know who this person is, by the way, the two hosts. Yeah. But I don't want to call out the company. I don't want to call out. That's not fair.
Yeah. But you should have publicized it, honestly, like internally. That's the kind of story that you kind of want to tell people and go, you know what? I'm not saying it works every time, but let's try that again. Even if we use another means, let's see how many times this works. Like, I would want to get people on board with that and say, I understand that you thought I was crazy, and you probably did to some degree say, yeah, I understand, like a day for everything. Like, what am I thinking? But you were thinking about something, right? Like, I'm sure you weren't super confident in your estimate that you would have bet.
What I was thinking was somebody really needs to write out what needs to be done here. In a way, I was indicting the requirements. I was indicting. I'm being kind of mean, but I was indicting what the project description was. Like, nobody has thought this through.
Right.
It doesn't make me better than anyone else. What I'm just saying is, let's think it through. And now we look at how big this list is. Should that scare anyone? Should that give anyone pause?
Let's just put this out there. I'm sorry, Rich. I gotta interrupt here for a second. Let's just put this out there. I'm going to go on record and say, Chris, you are better than other people. Okay, so I will go on record with that. But that's another story. Sorry, Rich.
That's okay. I think with putting that list together shows that you understand what it's going to take to build this, right? Regardless of the time estimate and any of those things. And when you aren't able to do that, I think that's when you really need to have that bit of time where you do that exploration and say, all right, what's this really going to mean to put this together? Because if you can't put that list together, say, this is everything we know what it's going to take and we know what it all is, regardless of time, then you at least have some comfort with what it is you're trying to build.
Yeah, if you can't tell me, right, you look at the business, you say, if you can't tell me what you want, don't expect me to tell you how long it's going to take, right, is a part of it. Now, some of the requirements are really technical requirements, and that sort of changes a little bit. But if they can't give you more than a one paragraph, one sentence on what they want, that's another problem as well. I mean, I think there's two sides to that, we all have to figure it out. So
you all know Gomez's law, right? That the longer a branch, remains.
What is? Maybe you could put it in the chat because I don't exactly remember what Gomez's law is.
It's kind of like
chat. We should use featured chat and put it up on screen if you don't mind.
It's kind of like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's a little different every time, whether it's radio to books to movie. There's some slight tweaks. Just being honest. So what Gomez's law is simply that the longer a branch remains before it is merged back into the trunk, the more afraid the team will be to delete it or get rid of it. That's simply the law. Right. But the reason why I say that is because I think it's fun to have. I've just always wanted a law like Planck's constant. or the universal gas law. I want one of those named after me. So I've been trying, right? And like Schwam, Andy, how does
this fit into our conversation here? When we have some really interesting topics like CoPilot or even ESLint out there, and we're talking about Gomez's law.
Because I have another observation, which I don't want to override the law but maybe this
okay.
name some other time.
All right, go ahead.
If you're a football fan, and when I say football, I mean American football, gridiron football. So I'm sorry if you're watching and you say you think you not incorrectly think that football is a game that you play with your feet and other parts of your body that aren't your hands. I'm not complaining about that. If you're a big fan of American football, there is a saying in professional American football that you may have heard of. If you need a star quarterback to be a good team, right? And teams in the NFL, this not so much in college, in the NFL, where they maybe say like, we're going to have a quarterback competition to see who's going to start for us. Can either of you, if you're big football fans, or maybe Andy, I know your son's a big football fan, can you think of any football team that started the year having a quarterback competition that then contended to win the championship or even came close or even made the playoffs? And it's because there is a saying in football, if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. I don't know if you've ever heard that. I've heard some commentators say it. I've heard some coaches say it. If you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks, because basically you don't really have anybody who can lead the team. My corollary.
Okay, neither one of them is really good enough, is what you're saying. You got two. Yeah, all right. Well, how does this have to do? Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
Is that, have you ever been, and maybe this earlier in your careers, now that we're maybe a little wiser and a little less hair, you've been more and in positions where you can't speak, you can speak back to the business and you are taken seriously, which unfortunately is something that you work, that's a whole topic right there, isn't it? Is when someone in the business tells you and you're asking them, what should we get done first? And like, well, it's all got to get done. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah.
Everything's got to get done. Like, well, yeah. What do we absolutely have to have for next week? Well, it's all got to get done.
Chris, you asked, so does that ever happen to you? Like, it happened twice today. You know what I mean? Like,
okay. Does that ever... Well, can the business at least prioritize it and say these things first, these things last? Because my take has been, if everything's a priority, nothing is a priority. If the business doesn't take an active role and be a partner in helping you prioritize the list, and you should be a partner in that too as a developer. That is your job as a professional. If you can't prioritize that list so that, relatively speaking, you can take something off the top and that's what you work on next. I know it's not perfectly top 1, 2, 3, but you're taking stuff from there and not from there. If you can't do that as a development team, then what happens, and this is what the business doesn't understand, many businesses don't understand, is you're going to pick. As a developer, you're going to pick. And what I have found in my career is, from developer to developer, they choose different things that matter to them. One developer might want to do the hardest thing first, what they perceive to be. Another developer goes for the low-hanging fruit, the things they've done before. Another one says, hey, I've never ever done anything with, I'm going to pick some Azure Key Vault before. So guess what? I'm going to lose myself for a couple weeks learning about Azure Key Vault. And it's like, you had everything was a priority. So now nothing's a priority. So it's important. And that was the purpose of partially making that list that I talked about was can we look at this list and maybe decide some things that are at the bottom of the list? And if we're getting near the end, maybe they don't have to go. That's hard, though, for anyone to let go of. No, they all have to go. And it's like, well, getting a little close to having two quarterbacks here. That's the way I look at it. Yeah. If no feature can be cut, then I start to worry that what are we building here?
Yeah. I mean, you certainly go into it and say, hey, it's on the list where it is in scope for us to attempt to get it. But if push comes to shove, those things might fall off, or we move the date out, right? We can't do both. You just effectively run out of time.
Yeah. Prioritization is such a big thing and a big problem. And I was having a phone call with some business people not that long ago, and they were, sort of complaining about like a number two priority didn't get done or something like that. I said, well, that does seem kind of like a problem. I mean, in a whole sprint, usually we get a few things done. And I was kind of like, why didn't the number 2 priority didn't get done? I said, so are you saying that like only the number 1 priority? I forget how it came around. And they're like, oh no, some of our number 2 priorities got done and a bunch of our number 1 priorities got done. And that's when I was like, I think we have a problem here, because that doesn't seem like, priorities. We could do a whole show. I would love to do a show on prioritization and stuff like that. Viable Clan Member is throwing out topics all over the place.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to the first one, and I don't. And they are onto their third or fourth good topic. We could talk about. I don't know. Do you guys mind? We could just talk about these things. Do we stand during stand-ups? I would say the answer for me is. Oh, what's this? Chris.
What happened?
That's for later.
Oh, that's for later. Yeah, let's come back to that. So I don't stand in stand-ups when they're virtual. That's for sure. Meaning, like when we're all working remotely, I think everybody sits down. Maybe some people stand up if you have a standing desk. When we're in the room, we stand during our stand-ups.
Yeah.
Sorry. Right. Viable Clan Member.
It's okay.
Yeah, that would be the awkward. That would be awkward. The old wheelchair situation. No.
So folks that know me know that I've worked 100% remote for a few years now, not even prior to COVID. So I don't want to say the question's irrelevant, because I can tell you in the past I have been in stand-ups where hey, you stand up. And not just because we saw it as somebody. There's a tip. That's a common tip. It's a common tip to stand up. But the reason was
short. They're called that for a reason. Yeah.
We'll try and shorten the stand up, right? Because they, if I don't want to say it's about making you uncomfortable, but it's like, hey, we're just here to give stats and go.
No, it is about making you uncomfortable. I mean, honestly, like I think that's exactly what it's meant to do. It's called a stand up because if you sit, you get comfortable and you start talking about stuff. I mean, it's a thought out name for something. And, I mean, honestly, and I mean that in a good way. Like,
yeah, right.
Like, how can such a simple idea be such a good idea? You can agree with whether we should have stand-ups or not, right? But if you want to keep something short, the idea is to make it uncomfortable. Like, it's a really great idea. I wish I could think of things that were like simple solutions to big problems. Someone was having a problem where their meetings were going on and they're going on and they're going on too long. And somebody came up with this idea somewhere and said, let's stand. I mean, how do you not, like, I love like the idea, that concept. I wish I could think of something so simple, such a solution
like Gomez,
to something.
Right.
Well, I want to reach for the stars, like that would, so I think,
I hear what you're saying is you want, so can I ask you something about stand up then? Because I think one of the reasons they run long is there is a tendency sometimes of either the group or the people, the group think that sort of takes place, that when somebody's giving their status, that let's talk about the problem. How do we help them fix it? And where do you draw the line between I'm removing blockers and, okay, that's your status. Let's talk about that more either after stand up when everyone else is free to go, or let's meet in this conference room a little bit later, or I'll go back to your cube and work on it. Like, where do you draw that line, and how do you know, like, hey, let's keep moving, and do that without being.
I'll tell you a funny story. I mean, it's funny to me, I guess. It's a funny memory. A couple jobs ago, I worked at a place, and we came up with this concept of Scrum Police. And at any point in the stand-up, when someone was rambling, and I'm not saying it was me that was rambling. It could have been anyone. It really could have been anyone rambling. I mean, there's a slight chance that it was me, but it could have been anyone. And the point is that anyone at any time, and I'm trying to like lean into the camera to see if you can see this, anyone could put their sort of fist in the air and put this symbol, and it was like supposed to be stop, and that was what was called the Scrum Police. And it was a funny joke. It was always sort of some laughter came about. And it didn't matter what you were saying, but you had to recognize that the other person is saying, you've gone on too long. And it didn't matter who it was in that room. I could put my hand up. Someone else could put a hand up. Someone eventually, like you start out 3 questions. What did I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? Do I have any roadblocks? Yesterday, I built the login screen. today I'm going to be doing some testing on the logging screen, and I don't have any roadblocks, but I do want to say that when I'm testing the, blah, 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 and everyone will let that go for a couple sentences. And at a certain point, someone says, that's it. You're done. And you got to look at it and go, yeah, you're right. Sorry. Chris, can you and I catch up on that later? But if you sneak a few sentences in there, people will allow it. That's the way, that was the police. The police would go I'm going to give you a little bit to get a couple sentences in there and ask a simple question or two. But if it sounds like you're trying to have a conversation about something, police comes up and you're done. And it actually worked pretty well. I mean, it was a little bit of a joke, right? But it worked. Anyone had the power to be the police. You know what I mean? But we had to turn it into this sort of funny thing, because people do have a tendency to go off on different topics. Another thing we did is we had a whiteboard in the Scrum room, and what we would say is the Scrum, in the Scrum police or whatever, we'd say put a pin in it. You write the topic on the wall, okay? And what we would do is say, let's move on. Chris, it's your turn to do the stand-up, or Rich, it's your turn to talk. But we wrote that thing on the wall. And afterwards, anybody who wants to hang out will talk about that. But the Scrum is over. People can leave, and we could stick in a room for those topics. That's another way. That's another way to do it. And we got some comments in here about this kind of stuff too. Z meant, nice. So saying later on a voice call in place of the fist. Yeah, right. You can't do the fist on a voice call, right? There's ways to do it, but maybe you just press the one of the number buttons on the keypad, and you're you cut people off. But I will say this: there's the thing you need to do first, which is often the case in a lot of these ceremonies or things, right? Is make sure that the team gets that up front, that the team understands, right? There's no person who's in charge of the team, and everyone should know what the Scrum is all about and why we're keeping it short. And no, I'm not trying to be a jerk when I say, hey, let's talk about that later. I'm trying to preserve the dignity of the ceremony, right? And the team should really understand the reason for those things, right? As opposed to just one person always saying stop, right? And you got to try to be unbiased. You let Chris talk for a while, but why are you cutting Rich off? Whatever. I mean, but if you have a good team, everyone should get that and go, right, sorry, let's move on. Side channel.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talked about, and in the chat here, we even have, later is the key, though, because when you're a completely remote team, I found that sometimes hanging around after stand-up, even virtually, has been a good way for the team to sort of pair or mob program over something, which is things that we just talked about recently. We talked about, pair programming and mob programming and so on a recent show. So I guess what I'm trying to think of is that analogy to the going to the workplace, which, hey, I've been in stand-ups going to a workplace, and sure enough, we stood up around a table, and then after a couple weeks, everybody was kind of, I guess, tired, and so we started sitting down more. I'm not gonna claim that every stand-up I've been a part of has been like the pinnacle of success. Just not the case. So you keep learning in this industry, right? Oddly enough,
Absolutely.
I'm not hearing.
Yeah, that's the whole point, right? Is to just not everything we do is going to be perfect, But what kind of trajectory? Excuse me. What kind of trajectory are we on? Are we mostly doing things the right way? Are we getting better at them? Let me tell you, we've all had times where we walked into stand-ups on a Monday, and I'd say to people, "Guy, I'm sitting. We'll keep it short, but I'm just not it was a rough night, or whatever." That's okay. That's not really the point, I don't think. Those odd cases, right? I think
There's that put a pin phrase.
Yeah, put a pin in
that
it.
we've got here. coming up on screen now. If you're not watching though, we used to have Common Talk when someone went off that quote, "Hey, it seems you need to talk with X after this conversation, so let's agree." You talk to him and put a pin in it, and that's from Zement in the chat. A second time we've heard that. You said that too, Andy. Put a pin in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a phrase for for a reminder and stuff like that, right? But I like the fact that what Zement is saying is that the team sort of heard it. The team already agreed. Like, I think this is a thing for you two to work out, not in a negative way, but in a positive way. Like, you guys need to talk this one thing through, but we don't all need to sit here and listen to it, right?
Right.
Yeah. There's a lot of good chat today. A lot of good chat in here. Looking through here a little bit.
Do you want to jump over a little bit? And the reason why I'm thinking about jumping over to this is on last week's show, we talked about some new tooling in Visual Studio 2022, and we tried it out, and it was a live tryout, right? I mean, neither Andy nor I had extensively worked with what is it again? IntelliCode. IntelliCode is what the feature is called, right? We knew about it, but either of us had not extensively tried it out, and we're total experts, and we weren't going to sit there and say like, yeah, man, this is everything you need to know about. It was more like, let's try it,
right?
With varied results. But here we are, the announcement just the other day. I'm not sure if the announcement was yesterday or whatever. The announcement of GitHub CoPilot, which is relevant because Viable Clan member asked, what are all your thoughts on GitLab's, I think he meant GitHub's new CoPilot, beginning of the end, I feel, right? Like Skynet is here to write our code. We are no longer necessary. So all I did was put on my screen I put nothing more than the GitHub CoPilot homepage where they have a little demo GIF that you run to look at it. I'm going to try to get that up
on screen, but when I put it up on screen right now, and this worked earlier when I tested it for Rich, when I put it up on screen, all I get is you, and I wonder if that's the way your like all I'm getting is your camera, which is your virtual cam. And I don't know if that's the way you set things up.
Skype's not sharing.
Skype is sharing. I'm seeing it on Skype. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me because I'm moving from. Give me a second. Let me see if I can check something.
Or you can bring it up because we can give you the URL.
Mm-hmm.
Just copilot.github.com. And one of the examples that I saw in a different demo was, I can't remember what the language was. I just don't remember. But you typed, the person typed something like var, or maybe it was a function like, gosh, what was it? It was like function tweet, send a tweet. And then what happened was Copilot looked at the name of your function, said, oh, you want to send a tweet? And it just threw up as a suggestion a function that, like, for example, took a string and then called the Twitter API and sent your tweet. And I saw that and I thought, when you think about it, there probably is a ton of this common code that people are writing every day, and they are checking into their GitHub repositories, and they're doing it with open source licenses. So it's not like, again, I haven't looked into this too carefully, but it's not to be nefarious. Nobody's trying to be stealing secrets or anything. It's just like, hey, that particular project says it's open source. Anybody could have done this, right? They just start feeding it into machine learning. I make it sound super easy. Why hasn't this existed? And well, here it is, right? Your AI pair programmer with GitHub Copilot get suggestions for whole lines or entire functions right inside your editor.
But how is this different? How is this different than IntelliCode that we showed last week, and where that's headed?
I didn't say it was different.
Oh no, I'm just wondering, is it? Yeah.
We saw interesting things like that when we were using IntelliCode, that you would create a class, and you would add the first name data member, and IntelliCode put on the next line string last name, thinking like, hey, most of the time when people have a first name member, they got a last name member coming up, and then an email, and then a phone. And it was like, I kept nodding, going like, huh. It's not that I thought it was writing perfect code. I never once thought that, but I just thought like, it's not wrong.
Right. I tell you what I think this is, because in the chat it said, I'm just trying to look through, is this, oh my God, the chat has gone by pretty quickly. Holy moly. I'm like way behind, but is this like, the robots writing the code for you or something like that, right? And is it? But to me, this isn't so much the robots writing the code for me. This is saving me a trip to Google to go like, I can't remember how to do this, so I'm just going to Google it and copy and paste it anyway. This is saving me that trip. Is this actually going to write the code for me that's going to, change my business for the better? I don't think so. I think that we still need to be involved. Now, this stuff can get better, and maybe it can help take away the need. You could say, oh, well, I think it's a learning tool. I mean, I really just don't see. I think we're pretty far away still from the machines taking over. What do you guys think?
If you could bring this up. Oh, you did bring it up. Or you brought up your screen? Or?
Yeah, I had to do it on my screen because yours wasn't. Rich's share works. It was yours that didn't.
Is if you replace some of these, I don't know if the first one was the best one, but what I found so interesting was the one that's the next one down under the more than autocomplete. The screen turns to white after that.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, thanks.
At first, it starts typing a function, and they're using Go, and they type func average runtime in seconds, and then CoPilot just suggests for them, well, heck, if you want the average runtime in seconds, I guess you're going to take in an array of these things, and then I'll look. It's an algorithm. The average is an algorithm. Boom. If you hit replay on that, it'll show you what it came up with. Yeah. So everybody can watch that replay there.
Yeah, I did replay. I mean, I did it. Yeah. You're probably seeing it behind, but I did replay it.
Okay, it's like, what about this?
Right.
And I mean, and I was kind of scrolling through some of the other ones. There's one further down where you write a method, and then you start writing the unit test, and it goes, well, I can see what the method does. And so, boom, unit test. Here are the assertions, right? And I'm thinking to myself, and listen, of course, and I've never tried this. I can't wait to try it. I have signed up for the preview, which I believe maybe works in Visual Studio Code. I don't know if it only works in Visual Studio Code. That's not important. I imagine that's, honestly,
probably
I believe.
At the worst, right? It'll be there sooner or later.
Yeah.
It says the preview's a code extension.
Yeah. You figure, of course, right? Of course, because how far away is that from going to Stack Overflow and finding the same answer? Except in this case, you're not having to search through all of GitHub for somebody that solved the same problem without ever answering the Stack Overflow question. And here, I'm pitching our friends at Stack Overflow.
So is this something that only works if your code is in GitHub, or like what? I don't know how this works. So does this work because I have a repo that's in GitHub? But I mean, I'm seeing it work in VS Code, right? So it's not happening. I'm just trying to figure out how this works. Like, I don't keep my code for work in GitHub.
It doesn't sound to me like it has necessarily to do with GitHub. Right. As more of just like GitHub has done the AI and machine learning,
right,
to basically look through the public code and say, it's like, it looks like you're trying to write an averaging function. Would you like me to help with that? And I refrained from saying, who used to say that?
And by the way, Z-Man said, what's wrong with going to Stack Overflow? There's nothing wrong with going to Stack Overflow. I spend my day there, right? I mean, I think we all do that. I mean, there's a lot of great tools.
Here's the interesting. what about the cases where the question hasn't been asked? Or you look and you look and you look and you just don't find the question, or maybe you find 10 of them, and it was, if you would have just looked at number 11, you would have got it, but you're tired of it. You're like, forget it. It reminds me of, there is so how many folks here, it's not a shock to anybody if I say XKCD, right?
I don't know what that is.
There's an XKCD strip that I love, and I'm going to send you the link. I'm going to just put it in chat, and it's xkcd.com/979. Yeah, like people in chat are like, come on, dude.
I don't know what XKCD is. I have no idea what you're talking about, honestly.
Go to xkcd.com.
In my browser? Wait, okay, hang on.
And don't worry.
XKCD. I'm sure you're going to give me something clean because you wouldn't do that to our show.
/979.
979.
This is related.
Yeah, I know you're seeing on a delay. So what happens now? So it says a webcomic of romance. Oh, so it's a comic. It's a comic strip.
Yeah, this particular comic, right? This is, and again, I'm not saying that Z-Man's absolutely right. Nothing wrong with Stack Overflow, but to me, GitHub CoPilot is the answer to this strip, where this particular user is saying, Googled an error and there's one result, a thread by someone with the same problem and no answer. Last posted to in 2003. Who were you, Denver Coder Line? What did you see? Right? I've been that.
Oh yeah.
In fact, I've been
weekly.
I've been the person who searched for the Stack Overflow question and then found it and said, gosh, nobody answered it. Who is the brilliant person who asked this? I have to see if I can get in touch with them. It's somebody, C. Gomez.
I like what Z-Man says here.
I'm not joking. That actually happened to me.
What Z-Man
really did happen to me.
Great. It's so lonely there. You feel so alone. Like, is anyone out there? Someone like me, and like this was 2003 when the last person was here, and now I'm here, and it's just like, oh, I got nothing, But listen, I really think, again, I think this is just the same situation. Just we're just speeding up the loop instead of having me to click in a browser and go look for something. We're just going to get some prompts. Now, what I worry about though is these prompts. If I'm going to go back to the screen, and I know it's a little bit of a delay for you, but when someone starts typing something, it starts prompting in some pretty long and detailed answers. And I wonder if that's going to be like noise. Like, I don't want to see that. I'm writing something. This is not what I wanted to do. And I'm going to have these CoPilot things, sort of like it was with IntelliSense, if you remember when we looked at it last week. And we like it. I'm not saying it's bad. We like it, but like, should it be like softer gray, or like how do we make it subtle so that it's not something that, like, this could be completely not what I wanted to do with this is positive answer that I'm showing on the screen right now. Like, that's not what I wanted to do, right? I was doing something totally different. So
I understand. I'm excited to try this. I do not know what to expect, but I guess part of me thinks, like, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, why not? Why shouldn't this work at least enough in some future that you say, hey, I'm just going to go start typing in my editor, and maybe CoPilot will drop in what it is I'm looking to do, Like, maybe, for example, you're working in .NET and you say to yourself, I want to build a background service, but I just don't remember. I don't remember how to get started with a background service. I could go to the docs, or I could like create a class and derive it from background service and have GitHub Copilot go boop.
Oh yeah, yeah, and maybe I could see myself, like, I don't know how this would work, because I could see myself having like two editors open, one with IntelliCode or CoPilot, open, right? And one without it. And the one I'm working on is the one without it. But every now and then I go and type in the one that it's got it turned on, and I ask it to like solve a problem for me. And then I copy that code into the one, you know what I mean? Like, copy it from one IDE to the other. I feel like I could see some weird things going like that, where like, you ever do the thing where you reverse generate, like, it's one of these things where you want to get some proxy class from something, but you don't want to have it like clutter up I know if I use the tool, it's going to put like 400 files in my solution, and I know I only want one of them. So I'll use a different window and like reverse generate the database into proxy classes, and then just take the few things I want, or whatever the story is. But hopefully you know what I mean about having like two windows open or two projects open and doing it like that.
I think you take it for what it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
let's
think about how long ago.
For what it is, though, let's just say this: whether you like it or not, whether you want to use it for the code purposes or not, the technology is cool.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The idea that by typing a little bit of code that you figure many others like you have probably done something similar, and maybe this is what you're looking for. I mean, because it wasn't really all that long ago that we didn't just go to our search engine and type some stuff in and get answers. It used to be, for me anyways, I remember saying like, well, I guess I'm going to have to head, this will make people laugh, I guess I'm going to have to head to Borders and look for a book on this. Because that was kind of like what the alternative was there.
I got to get in the car.
Yeah, what other alternative was there? There was no search engine for me to type in my problem.
Yeah, and then
had to go find out. If I needed to learn more about, I don't know, writing
anything. Listen, the same thing applies. We could take code out of this altogether. I fixed my my washing machine and my dishwasher several times over the past few years because I went to YouTube and someone gave me the instructions and I went and executed them, right? And that's not all that different than Googling an answer for some coding problem and looking at their answer and taking the code and pasting it in. And it's not that different than letting CoPilot or IntelliCode solve the problem for me, like a little more like, this is the same situation. We're just shortening we're just reducing the loop, the time of the loop. Like you said, it used to be you went and got the book, then we had message boards, then we had, forums. I mean, there's like, there's been all these different ways of getting there, right? And now we're here. I by the way, I feel like we should take like a 20-second break here, right? And just remind our guests, hey, if you're enjoying this conversation, we got people that are participating in the chat. We've got some people that are just hanging out. We know that. There's some people are just chilling and listening. If you like what we're doing, what we're talking about, follow us on Twitch. If you're on YouTube, you could subscribe to the YouTube channel. You might be doing that after the fact. You can add comments to YouTube after the fact. You can like things. All those kind of things really help us. Create a show that is going to be interesting and entertaining for you all. And we appreciate your time, and we just want to do something that's going to be great. Viable Claim Member says 6 lurkers there. I don't know. I don't care. Like, that's great. We love lurkers, right? And it's kind of like, we know there's different audiences. Some people just like to listen. Some people listen after the fact, and they just listen while they're jogging. I mean, who knows what, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just like to sit and listen.
Yeah, that's totally okay. Listen, we love interacting with the people. We love interacting with people who want to type into chat either on Twitch or YouTube, because we take in chat from both places, and it's totally awesome, and we love it. And it's the greatest thing to just be able to live have this conversation with folks, because we're not here to instruct or know, because trust me, we don't. We want to hear what you do as well, and we try to share it out as much as we can. But, folks that are here watching, thank you. Thanks for being here, and hope you're enjoying it. Hope that we are bringing to you things that you can take with you to work, or just on your journey to either become a software developer, improve as a software developer, or just, try to get through this Wednesday evening talking a little bit something that a little bit more specialized, right? Like, we're not we're not talking about like the score of the Phillies game or anything, which might be. I don't even know if the Phillies are playing tonight. So
they are. But so's there's also a Stanley Cup game tonight for what it's worth.
Well, yeah, that's right, and that's true. Let me tell you, I can't believe that I am not watching Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final because I want to be here. So.
Yeah, and we're not done with this conversation, right? I was just throwing out the little commercial here, and we're not. We could go back to talking about, this CoPilot. We can go back to there was some other topics in the chat from way back, weren't there? I don't know.
Yeah.
What was back in?
Because one of the things I started off with tonight was thinking about how, there's so many little projects that I've talked about starting on for years, and this is now personal projects, and taking that first step has proved I'll do this tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow is 2021, 2020, how many years? So
yeah. Tomorrow, I say a lot of times when we're talking about like planning projects, and people are like, well, we've got some time. I say, and I would say this like today, today is June 30th when we're, if you're not watching this live or listening live, June 30th. And I'll say, tomorrow's September. And it really is like tomorrow's September.
Yeah.
Or I'll say tomorrow, November, we'll do it November. November's tomorrow. Like it will be here before you know it. The things creep up on us and it's really hard. I do want to throw out a tip also, Chris. You're saying that how do you get started on things, right? And I think you were talking about like the technical aspect of it, but there's a mental aspect of it too, how to get started on it. And two things, right? The first one is like sort of easy to say, like just do it, Chris. Like don't have excuse, just do it, which is easy, almost like a cop-out answer, because like thanks, just do it. Like if I would just do it, I would have just done it yesterday, right? So one of my tricks for these things, and it kind of comes from that like the gym paradigm of going to work out, right? Is get a buddy or even just talk about it. I feel like if I tell people I have this great idea and I told people at work or I told some friends or I told my wife that I'm going to do this thing, whatever it is, writing an application or going to the gym or whatever. Well, now I said it out loud. Like now I got to do it. Like I'm kind of I put myself on the hook for it. And I did that on purpose. But I put myself on the hook for it. And, Z-Met says it right here. Just start. Don't fear if it fails. Oh, I still have my screen up here. Let's change this too. Yeah, don't fear if it fails. Just, fail fast, right? Just go for it. Just do it. I like that. I think that's and Viable Clan says fail fast, which is definitely a good way to do it. Now, listen, we all know what that means, right? We're not saying we want someone to fail. We don't want Chris to fail with this idea of his that he wants to try. But just get in there. And if it doesn't work, no harm done. You tried it,
You
my biggest problem with my biggest problem with projects, especially side projects, like non-work problems, isn't getting started. It's getting finished. I get started on the project, and then something else comes up. Especially we're talking about, well, it goes back to priorities, right? The side project is never the number one priority. When you're like me or us or whoever is watching or listening, do you have kids? Do you have a family? Like, how do you stay on the project, Chris? That's the question I want you to answer for me.
You said something though that I think actually is interesting. If you can at all, get someone to work with you or multiple people, and that this goes for any kind of project. I could even point at this show, frankly, is once you add people, you now have a commitment to a team. And I read this years ago. I wish I could find a little bit more of a basis for it than just the saying, right? Something better than like a Gomez's law. Like we want a commitment. Is that basically our brains are wired to fulfill our commitments to like the family or the team or
the tribe. Maybe that's that tribe mentality. What do you think of that?
More than yourselves. And it's just a wiring it's an evolutionary wiring. So instead of fighting it, take advantage of it. And that's hard, though. It's hard. Mm-hmm. You got to get someone else just as interested as you are, and then feel committed that, like, hey, man, Andy and Rich are probably getting ready. They've given away their Wednesday night so they can be here. So I'd better make sure that everything's clear, And that's just the truth.
Yeah.
Goes for everything you do.
Rich, I'll call you out. What do you think? No, I'm just saying it because I start talking. So, give you
I was giving you the space to talk. That's no, I think Chris is right. And it's actually calling back to the kind of how we opened the show and talking about that video we did, that little, less than 10 minute, hey, kind of what's going on. That was kind of our way of saying, we've got half a year left. What are the projects we want to work on? So, but yeah, I think absolutely the more you can do to make it a public, declare that your intention, it makes it, puts a little weight behind following through on it.
Yeah. I certainly know that there are, I can only imagine that once you become associated with like the maintenance of some open source project or whatever, that you feel kind of a duty to make sure that it doesn't fall apart. And, we've seen people clearly burn out doing things like that. It's sometimes it can be a thankless job, right?
Yeah. It's an interesting article you brought up there, Andy.
Yeah, you see, I threw this up on screen, and I know it's the delay is not going to make it easy, but you guys can bring it up on your own personal screens too. This who put this up in here? Viable Clan member put up the science-backed reasons you shouldn't share your goals, which is sort of the contrast to what we're saying here, I think. And that doesn't, what do we know? We're throwing out our reasons why we think it is good to share our goals or something like that. But this is really interesting. I mean, right here, reason 1, receiving premature praise for a goal makes follow-through less likely. That's, I don't think this is sarcasm, right? I mean, because I would think premature praise helps me sort of stick with it personally. That's interesting. Receiving person praise versus process praise could decrease your motivation. This is interesting.
Yeah, I sort of get some of these, like where it says reason number 5, hearing about competition might make you back off. You see, you start a little project and then you find out somebody just points it out to you like, oh, you're doing something like, I'm just gonna make something up. Totally, like you start working on something and somebody says, oh, like Spotify. And you go, huh? And then you go look at it and you go, oh, well, you might even say to yourself what I've done in the past, which is like, yeah, like that's not quite how I want it to work. But you know what happens? You have had a significant amount of motivation pulled from you because even though it's not quite how you want to do it, now it's like, I got to catch up to that before I would be able to do what I really wanted. And so I could see that.
This one.
I mean, how many times is that?
Oh, sorry, Rich, go ahead.
How many times does that happen where you have an idea is like a video, a blog post, an idea to just kind of work on something and says, well, they've already done it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Tim Corey obviously beat me to it, because the guy makes like 2 videos a week or something like that. Like, how am I going to make a video? Right. And I mean, that is a good thing, a compliment to Tim, right? But the point is, if you stop and think about some of those things, it can be like a crushing, and it's okay to have, the video that someone else might have. You're going to put a slightly different spin on it, but you're doing it. And again, half the time we're doing these things, it's because we know we learn when we make the video anyway. And I want to learn by making the video, right? Look at this one I have up on screen. I don't know if you see this. Reason number 3, if you're a beginner, getting negative feedback could stop you. Now, I had this happen when I was not even a beginner, but the person who was giving me the negative feedback was someone that I honestly really respected. And it wasn't so much negative feedback, but they were pointing out the complications that were going to come along this app. I had this idea, and I'm still convinced it's a great idea. I've had a couple of them in my life. And a lot of people told me, like, Andy, you should build that. Yeah, go. And this person I had a conversation with and took the wind out of my sails because they were really just pointing out like, this is going to be a problem. It was something social. It was like having really accessible stuff in the cloud. And they're like, well, if something goes social, it's going to blow up so fast. And what are you going to do? How are you going to support the thing? Your costs are going to be too high. Like all these sort of things. And it got in my head. And I don't think I wrote another line of code after that conversation. And I'm not using names on who that person is because I don't want to be, person's
and
also giving me good. Yeah, right. I'm not saying that Rich Ross gave me that advice, but it was not Rich Ross. It was not. But this is interesting. I mean, there's a lot of philosophies and reasons. For every reason we might say something is a good idea, here's a whole blog post like with these things about saying why it's a bad idea. Whatever. There's a lot of ways to look at things. Hey, this is the one you guys were talking about. Hearing about competition might make you back off, right? Number 5. Interesting article. I feel like this is I feel like this is a good article to read and remember and come back to it and say, I don't want to fall for these tricks anymore, right? Like this should be the science, like I would like to put a different spin on this article and say, read this article. Because you don't want to fall for you should share your ideas, but don't be tripped up by these things. Because if you know about it, right? Like maybe if I know that receiving premature praise is going to make me less likely to follow through, if I know that, does that negate the thing right away? Right? And when you guys give me praise and I say, wait, Andy, don't fall for that. That's going to make you less, you know what I mean? Like just knowing about it solved the problem.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
article.
I like that we assumed that the only way to look at this was to find like a team or people to commit to. And then here it is, somebody saying not so fast, because that's good. That tells me that the first thing that I think about something is probably like, who cares, right? What evidence do I have?
Yeah.
So
no, Chris, you're exactly right. And I feel like there was a comment in the chat quite a while back that said something like, I'm trying to scram back for it, that said something like, I like working in an industry where people know that they don't know everything or they're not always right or something like that. I know that there was something like that in the chat. And if there wasn't, I might have misread it because, like as hosts, we sometimes just glance at the chat out of the corner of our eye and we don't read it right. But we work in an industry where we admit that we don't know all the answers. And Chris, the way you just said it is, even in this case, we don't know all the answers, right? Like, of course, we threw out an idea. Having a clan or having a team might make it better to achieve your goals. And then here's some great evidence that says why it's not true. I can't find that chat, but I would like to give someone credit for it.
Yeah, I found it.
You found it. Was I right or
Yep.
was I wrong about what it said?
It was close. It was Zment saying, I love dev industry because the whole basic tenet is that no one knows what's perfect. And we just all try to learn and get there. And, I love that positive outlook, because I do think that there are sometimes some negative vibes of people who do treat it as if you haven't done this, then, expectations about if you haven't done X, Y, or Z, then maybe you're not a quote unquote like real developer. And I feel like that conversation just doesn't have any place anywhere. And so I like that. That's true. It's true. I don't know that anybody sets out to know. I don't know that anyone sets out to build something, create something as they're coding, pretty much knowing exactly what they're going to write line by line by line. There might be things you've done before, like you've called APIs. Okay, fine. You've made those RESTful HTTP calls. You know how to do that. You write to some data store. Hey, I know how to do that. logging to a file. You know how to do that, but there's you wouldn't be building it. You wouldn't be building it probably unless there was something you didn't know how to do, because otherwise maybe you could just buy it. So
yeah. And ZMAT has so by the way, there was a good comment by Rebel Zoo too. Right? I don't know if you put that one up. If you can't admit you don't have all the answers, you've already admitted it. I love the way that was put. I like that one. I also appreciate ZMAT saying, it's not only this technology stuff, it's not just work stuff, but just trying to figure out ways of solving problems, talking about like losing weight and stopping some abuse and stuff like that of tobacco. And I that's good. That's good stuff to share with people. Appreciate you sharing these kind of comments with us, because these real world scenarios are the ones that matter, and different things work for different people, right? So it's just finding out what works for you. So no one answer right to anything.
I love that you're bringing up the game development industry there in chat, because it's like a little like I wish that I had the time to make that a hobby. We did a show where I used the phaser framework to just get something running on Xbox, right? Just to show people that you can do it. It can be running on your own console, and it's kind of cool, really kind of neat to play with the controller. And you don't have to take that step. Even just playing it on your own machine, your PC or Mac or whatever, is fine. But that's something that I would have when I was getting started in this industry. I kind of was at that crossroads pretty early on of take a job with a game development firm. It happened to be one in Torrance that I'd interviewed with, or take this other job that was a little bit more traditional line of business. And I made the second choice, and that was it. Rest was history. That's where I've stayed, generally speaking. I mean, I've done a lot of different things, but it's that is fun to think about. So yeah, you just done things like Zeman says. I know basically nothing. I just have experience. There's something to be said about that statement, right? Is because I said it a little bit earlier. I think something similar of, sure, I've done that before. There was a first time that I had to write. I'll pick something from the distant past. There was a first time that I had to write a SQL query to pull something out of a database, and I had no idea what I was doing, like at all. Select, what does that? Explain this to me. What do you mean? And then, I mean, even some concepts that probably are just rote were not straightforward at the beginning. Like, so I do this. It seems like magic. I do this, and then a bunch of stuff comes back over the wire, and then I got to like go through it, like item by item. And then somebody a little bit more experienced than you says like, oh no, you can filter it ahead of time. That's what the where clause is for. And it's just, that sounds so basic and rote, but there was a day a while ago when that was brand new to me, and it was mysterious and it was powerful. It was mysterious and powerful. Like, look what I did. This is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thinking about the original comment, you're referring back to about how, experience, like, it was often said, and again, I don't know whether, viewers have gone to college or not gone to college, and I'm not the biggest fan of that, right? Like, I went to college, not for even technology, for other stuff. But I do like the thing where people say, well, one of the things you learn in college is how to think about things, right? That's, forget about the detail of why you go, what you're studying in college, but they say, you learn how to learn, right? Or you learn how to think about things. And I think that you can certainly get that experience on the job, right? You get more of it on the job. And I think that's what this whole thing about experience is that we don't know how to solve the problem. We don't know the answer, but we've got experience, and we've solved other problems, and we know problem solving techniques, right? It's just that learning process of like learning ways to do things, because every problem is a little different. But it's like, we know we don't know it, but we know we've got some experience. And I like that Z-Man said, we we've got experience and we've solved some problems before. And hopefully one of the problems I've solved in the past is sort of similar to the problem I'm going to solve tomorrow. And maybe that's going to help me. But I'm also going to ask other people for help when I'm trying to solve that problem. I mean, we're going to collaborate. We're going to bring in a team and all those kind of things because we don't know the answers. We don't know all the answers. We have ideas, you know. And that's why I like brainstorming with people. I love the process of brainstorming. I'll say to people, listen, I'm going to throw some potentially stupid stuff out into this conversation. I'm going to throw out an idea. You know what? Maybe I'm going to get lucky on one of these things, but some of them are going to be bad ideas. And that's okay. I at least that's the way I feel. It's okay. I'm just going to start rolling out ideas, and I want you to do that too. And one of us is going to hear something and something the other person says. I may say something totally wacky, but you know, we're collaborating, and you might hear like one or two words in that dumb thing I said, and it might spark something in you, and you're like, you know what? Hang on, that crazy idea you had isn't really right, but what if we changed it a little bit, you know, or something like that. We don't have the answers. We got to work together, and we get to try. And actually, this is the thing I love about our jobs, is that we're solving different problems every day. Every day we solve different problems.
And that what you mentioned there is kind of core to the brainstorming activity, right? You got to be able to, no idea's a bad idea. We're just going to throw them all out. And then this way it lets people be comfortable sharing whatever ideas that might come up. And then we'll discuss it later and see if, you know, whether we should move it along or not. But at least for that amount of time that you're doing the brainstorming exercise, is just no idea's a bad idea.
No idea's a bad idea. Exactly. I mean, they are bad. You know, at the end of the day, we find out later. I mean, I'm joking, right?
Later.
Like, some of them turned out to be bad ideas, but, you know, it's worth bringing them up is the point, you know?
Right.
Yeah. No, I like it. And, you know, brainstorming sessions can be good. And there's tools for that as well. You know, that could be a show. I'm just thinking, I think of all these things as we talk about these things. Like there's a topic like brainstorming, you know, problem solving, all this kind of stuff. But I like, you know, this show. So I'm just going to say this now. I don't mind saying this. Talk about not knowing the answer. We did not know that when the question that was asked even earlier today is, what are we going to talk about on this show? We did not know the answer, right? And
right.
Chris just started us off with some questions, like out of the blue, pulled us out. And this is turning out to be a fun show, which I just kind of want to point out to people that I think it's kind of cool that we're having a really good conversation. We're getting a lot of comments from the crowd, and we're just talking about things. Chris, you did have a really good, I don't know where that came from. You just threw out a topic at the beginning. But that was sort of like brainstorming. Like, let's just start talking about stuff and see what comes out. How does this show work out tonight? It was a little bit of an experiment.
So I feel like, having been doing this for a little bit, there are like these great mysteries to software development to me. And I don't know that we're all that good at them. And that's kind of why, like, I'll ask the most basic questions sometimes, saying like, how do we really get things started? And can we do better than just opening up the editor and starting to wail away at the keyboard? Is that some kind of coping mechanism for not knowing what to do? Like, well, let's just start banging out some code. And what are we getting ourselves into? We talked about that a little bit. We talked a little bit about like throwing away the prototype, or at least the fact that both of you talked about committing to something being a prototype and being knowing that you were going to get away with it, get away from it. But certainly I know there's a lot of topics in the future that we'd like to cover. Some of them I think are reaching out to friends in the community and seeing if we can get them to help us with some things, because if there's one thing for sure, is that the three of us don't know everything. And half the reason for starting the show, I think probably about half, I may not have that measurement exact, but half the reason for starting the show is that if the three of us would just, we all come from a user group out our way, the Philly.net user group. And it was very common to kind of stand in the parking lot and talk. And wouldn't it be wonderful if this parking lot conversation was a lot of folks from all over the world? So that's especially why we have this show and people like you join us tonight with your thoughts. That really helped. I think it really helped. We learned a lot. I learned a lot from folks in chat. So
yeah, we did the show. I think you're right. A lot of it was to learn, right? And we've got a sort of way to cheat a little bit in learning, right? I've had times on this show where I've said, I kind of want to learn something. So why don't we ask that person to come on the show? Like, because I needed to do this for work and I needed to learn it. So let's just invite a friend on that knows something about it. Give them a pulpit to talk for a while. And guess who's learning that, like, it wasn't an accident that we asked that person. And I can take that to work the next day and solve some problems, like, that's cool.
Yep. So we're on Wednesdays, 8:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So wherever you're watching us from, 8:30 U.S. Eastern Time, the Dev Talk Show. And if you want to catch any of our previous episodes, we are on YouTube. All of these shows are recorded and end up on the YouTube channel at youtube.com/TheDevTalkShow. We'll be back next week. I wish I could. Sometimes it's great when we can log off and say, hey, this is what we're doing next week. And I think getting the summer schedule going has been a little bit tougher. But I think it'd be great if perhaps sometime in the next couple of days, we might be able to get something out on Twitter, right? Twitter.com/TheDevTalkShow and say, hey, here's what we're doing. But in this case, really want to thank everybody who joined us tonight. We had some folks that I don't remember from previous shows, which doesn't mean, maybe you were here and I just don't remember. But like Z-Ment, the compliment, fantastic, where he says, awesome parking lot conversation. Thank you. I learned a lot from you. That really, thank you. I just want to, on the behalf of the, my two co-hosts, thank you just for saying that, because that's why we're doing it is we want to learn from you. And hopefully I said anything that you might go like, hey, I can take that to work tomorrow. And then I feel like, good, great. So Rich, Andy, anything else? We had kind of a free-form chat tonight. Sometimes they're more specific topics. If one of us gets lucky and gets into the GitHub CoPilot preview, then maybe there's a show there. But
or a guest who's in it. If somebody's listening and they're in, you could be the guest. Bring it, and help us out, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Definitely. If you're using GitHub Copilot, then let us know on Twitter at twitter.com/TheDevTalkShow or in the comments here on the YouTube channel. That'll work too. Because I had gotten into GitHub Code Spaces and we did like a whole show on it, and that was fun stuff. So, Rich, Andy, we're looking at next week. That is the 6th, right?
Yeah.
No, maybe it's not the 6th. I think it's the 7th. It's the 7th.
You're right, 7th. Yeah, yep. Monday's the
7th. So July 7th, 8:30. We will see you all there. Thanks to everybody who's followed, who's subbed, who's liked this video. Thank you so much. It really helps. It helps us know which episodes you love and which ones we should do more of. So if there's nothing else from my co-hosts Andy Schwamm and Rich Ross, I'm Chris Gomez, and we will see you next Wednesday on The Dev Talk Show.